Welcome to this week's episode of Weekend Reading, where I talk about what I read last weekend, what I'll be reading next weekend, and breaking down both as I go, and also do a little talking about the comic books in general. You'll see what I mean when I get to it. First off, let's get to what we read last weekend. Well, if you recall, we had Superman Action Comics Volume 5, The House of Ken, which was a decent read, a good end to Brian Michael Bendis' run. His stuff can be kind of hit or miss. This one was, he's done better. Firepower Volume 3, Flame War. This has been probably the best read I've been reading in the past couple of weeks, if you've read it, if you've seen any of my other videos, and this one kept it up pretty well too. And then we had a whole new one, which was Berserker Volume One. No title beyond that. This is a comic book that was created by Keanu Reeves and co-written by him. It really does read as like a movie or maybe even TV pitch for something starring Keanu Reeves. If the indication of what the character looks like is any indication, it was a decent start. But I'll have to see further into it if this is actually a really good series. But it's interesting. My favorite of the week, though, was, surprise, surprise, Firepower Volume 3, Flame War. It was a great continuation of the series. It could actually be almost a closing of the series because it wrapped up a lot of the story elements really well. Bringing up, the Owen Johnson dealing with his new life falling apart and having to go back into his old life, joining with the clan of the Scorched Earth clan and having to fight his old allies and the Flaming Fist clan. But it brought these two groups into conflict, but there were a lot of new story elements thrown in and crazy revelations, including one that I called from way back from last week when I read the last volume of the book. But I won't give it away in case you plan to read it. But it's brought, like, even though it brought some things to a close, there's still a lot to explore there. So I look forward to what the next volume will bring. But that hasn't come out yet, so next week will be a completely new thing. Pardon me. Speaking of next week, what do we got to read? Well, first up, we have the Immortal Hulk, Great Power. Let's see. I believe this isn't actually part of the ongoing Immortal Hulk book. It's like a separate, mini-series type thing. But let me see. The Immortal Hulk stars in Tales to Astonish from some of the most incredible talents in comics. Yeah, it's kind of like a anthology type thing. When Bruce Banner wakes up as himself in the dead of night, he thinks he's finally free. But the Hulk is immortal and he has a new alter ego, Peter Parker. Then, after a young girl goes missing on a Kansas farm, Banner searches for answers. But this town doesn't take kindly to strangers, especially the big, green, violent kind. When a new gamer-powered villain shows up in a small New Mexico town, Bruce is forced to confront the source of his anger, and it's not what you expect. And Bruce Banner faces a challenge unlike any he's seen before as he enters the Emerald Cinema. Okay. That should be interesting. Collecting Immortal Hulk, Great Power, The Threshing Place, Flatline, and material from Time of Monsters by Tom Taylor, Jeff Lemire, Declan Shalvey, David Vaughn, Jorge Molina, Mike Del Mundo, Kevin Nowlan, Adriano Di Benedetto, Robert Poggi, David Curiel, and Marco Di Alfonso. So not the main Immortal Hulk book, but that's a good crew of people, so this should be interesting. A completely new read here. We have Noctura, Volume 1, Full Throttle Dark. It's been 10 years since Valrig saw the sun swallowed up by darkness. 10 years since nearly everyone she knew was infected and changed into hideous shades. Now a ferryman providing transport for people and goods, she traverses the deadly, unlit roads in her 18-wheeler, taking on whatever evils the night provides. When the promise of an illuminated sanctuary crosses her path, Val must undergo a journey far beyond the limits of any ferryman before her. But with a loved one in the throes of infection, time is running short. Legendary creators Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniel, that's a good pair, unveil horrors beyond any shade in this pulse-pounding series, collecting Noctura 1 through 6. So yeah, I wasn't sure what to make of this one, but that is a good creative team, so I got to imagine it'll be fairly interesting. Who knows, maybe it'll be the favorite of the week. And then we got an old standby here. We have The Flash, Volume 15, Finish Line. Superstar writer Joshua Williams' 101-issue run on The Flash comes to a close. God damn, he's written that many. As Barry Allen faces the Reverse Flash and the high-speed hero's greatest rogues, forming a legion of Zoom, that's cute, including Captain Cold, the Turtle, Gorilla Grodd, and the Trickster, the Reverse Flash sets out to not only beat Barry Allen, but also assume his life. Can the fastest man alive keep up with the attacks around Central City when everyone and everything he loves is in danger? With his greatest enemy calling on Barry's children from the future, the Tornado Twins, the Flash family steps up to help the hero as he faces his biggest battle ever. Yeah, The Flash has been good lately. I didn't realize, damn, it's been that many fucking volumes. I knew he's been at it for a while, but holy crap. But, you know, this should be good. So yeah, that's next week. Or next weekend. Whatever. This coming weekend. You know what I mean. Alright, so what do we got to talk about this week? Well, I decided I'm going to do another abandoned plot. And the abandoned plot this week is an interesting one because it's not a very specific plot of a comic book. It's actually the direction of an entire comic book company that was just abandoned. Now, I'm sure something like that has happened before, but it was one of the times that I got to see it, or I got to be really aware of it. Basically, I'm talking about the New 52. If you have any confusion about what the New 52 is, I'm going to explain it, but also I read an interesting article about it in a site called Polygon recently, which really broke down everything and even talked to some of the creative people behind it. And it's to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, which I didn't even realize it was. I had just thought of this, but I guess I'm celebrating the 10-year anniversary too. This happened way back in 2011. I'll post a link to that article in case you want to read it. It really gives way more detail, probably more detail than I'm going to give. But to break it down, DC Comics every now and then will basically they have a habit of writing really grand stories. And sometimes when you write really grand stories, things can get a bit cluttered, get a bit messy, especially when you're handing off to different creative teams over the years. And especially when you have characters whose, some of their origins, especially the more famous ones, date back 70, 80 years. So every now and then, they've had to basically throw out big events to kind of rearrange or declutter things in their universes. They did this the first time way back in, I think it was 1984, or maybe 85. 84, 85, with the famous crossover storyline, Crisis on Infinite Earths, which kind of simplified a lot of the messiness that had been created with the DC Comics to make a more centralized universe. Then, 20 years later, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Crisis on Infinite Earths, in 2004, 2005, they had Infinite Crisis, which in a way sort of undid some things that Crisis on Infinite Earths did and sort of helped explain more of the multiversal concept of the DC universe. A couple years after that, in 2011, DC went through a managerial change. They went through a shakeup in the not only who ran DC Comics, but who was in charge of editorial, who was in charge of publishing, all this. And you had new people coming in who had some new ideas. And they thought that their characters had grown old and stagnant, and DC was not selling too well at that time, to be fair. I don't even think they were number 2 in sales. I mean, they were still lagging behind Marvel in sales, and they wanted to kind of freshen things up. So it wasn't so much a decluttering their see, the thing is, when they originally had to do these big events to try to clean things up, it really was to declutter confusing aspects of the storytelling. This time around, it was more of a way to try to boost sales, which, if you watched what I did last week, they use a lot of gimmicks to do that, and they don't always work out that well, because it's a soulless way to do things. You can tell when something is a real creative endeavor and when something is just like a cold-hearted way to make money. People can tell. It was still up in the air when this happened as to what this was going to be. If it was going to be a cold-hearted business decision or if it was going to be a real creative decision. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need the major event. So that year's major event was a thing called Flashpoint. It was a Flash-centric major event where the Flash went back in time to save his mother from being killed by the Reverse Flash, which he did, but in doing so, he completely rewrote history. And he just fucked up everything. It's like a butterfly effect thing. He changed one thing and that changed everything. So it changed his universe. Because it had become such a mess, he had to then go back in time. He then had to go back and change things. And sure, his mother died, and go back and change it to try to change things back to normal. At the end of that series, though, we find out that he didn't change things back to normal. Trying to change things back from how he changed before, he kind of broke time and reality, and in trying to repair it, it was going to become something brand new. That new thing was the New 52. The New 52 basically started with them ending all of their series. Just they canceled every book they had. DC canceled every comic book they had, and then in the next month started off every book with a new number 1. This is what I believe was the starting of the, hey, number 1s help sell comic books. Because when they started 52 new comic books, hence the New 52. They started 52 new comic books, all from number 1. Their whole new line. And even Marvel picked up on this, hey, number 1s are big sales because all of these comic books sold huge. DC sales went through the roof with these number 1s, and it looked like it was a huge fucking success. But there were a lot of changes made to a lot of characters, and people wanted to see what kind of changes were made and if they liked them, because they're basically, the whole concept of the New 52 is that now they were basically just starting 5 years removed from the appearance of Superman in the modern age. So basically they were throwing out decades worth of history and stories, and you don't know what the new stories were. So there was a lot of backtracking to try to explain that and see if people liked it. As much as DC wanted to act like this was their own thing, they really were copying Marvel. Because a couple years before that, Marvel had launched a line called the Ultimates line. The Ultimates line was basically reimagining their heroes in the modern age. So you had it started with Ultimate Spider-Man, which was super popular. Then there was Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates, which was basically the Ultimate Avengers, and the Ultimate Fantastic Four. The Ultimates line had a lot of impact. It does not exist anymore, but it did have a lot of impact at the time. It reinvigorated a lot of interest. It basically set the standard for what the Avengers movie would look like, and especially with the ultimate version of Nick Fury. Yeah, if you look at that picture, you can't tell me that doesn't look like Samuel L. Jackson. That was before the Avengers. That was before any of the Marvel movies. So that's where that came from, in case you were wondering. The biggest holdover from the Ultimates line is obviously Miles Morales, the Black Latino Spider-Man, who still exists to this day. He's the one thing from the Ultimates line that he's not the only thing, but he's definitely the biggest thing from the Ultimates line that still exists. And there was even a way that Marvel wrapped that into their main universe. Because, see, here's the difference. When they started things from scratch, they didn't just start the Marvel Universe from scratch. The main Marvel Universe was still going. This was a whole separate comic book series. And just a whole different line of comic books, where everybody got to, play with these characters from scratch and do whatever they wanted, which was kind of fun for a while. DC tried to do the same thing, where they tried these books called All-Stars, the All-Star line. They had All-Star Superman and Batman, but they didn't stick with them very much, and it didn't work out. They've recently retried something similar with the Earth 1 books, but it seems to be following a similar pattern where they don't really stick to it as stringently, so that's why it doesn't work out. Like, the Ultimates line Marvel was very dedicated to that. So DC was starting from scratch like that, but with their main comic book line. And that's where they kind of screwed up. Because Marvel got to have their cake and eat it too, with their main comic book still going, and this Ultimate line where they got to start everything fresh. So you could have either one. DC just decided to make the decision for everybody. We're going to start fresh and throw away the history of everything we've done before. And problem number 2 was, remember I said the Ultimates line doesn't exist anymore? It went well for a while, but eventually it became a fucking mess and was just thrown away. And they had to simplify things there too. And that hadn't happened yet when they decided to do the New 52, but it was clear that things were already getting messy in the Ultimates line, and you'd think if DC was following that pattern, they would have paid attention to that. Most every character was changed in some significant way. The only books that didn't really change in the New 52 were Batman, Green Lantern, and Green Lantern Corps. Those were the 3 books that essentially just basically picked up where their previous series had left off, with no major changes made to them. Everyone else changed drastically. And like I said, at first it sold very well. And one of the things they had in the New 52 was this character named Pandora. She was this enigmatic character. She appeared at the end of Flashpoint and seemed to somehow have a hand in helping rewrite the universe. And she even appeared in the background of every #1 of the New 52 releases. She appeared in the background of every single one. It actually became a thing when people started noticing her, like, wait, who's that chick? And then if you read another issue, like, oh, that's that chick again. And then you started to think, I wonder if she's in all of them. And then you went and looked, and you started looking. It was like, where's Waldo? It was like, oh, there she is. But that was only for the first issue. She was supposed to be this big character that had a hand in everything and was supposed to be, sort of a warning sign of something very bad coming, and that's why she helped rewrite the universe. But that storyline never went anywhere, and her character was just ultimately forgotten. Like a lot of what happened in the New 52. Because, like I said, it sold well at first, but then after a while the sales started to tank. By, I think in less than 2 years, 27 of the 52 series had been canceled. Their sales were abysmal. To DC's credit, they tried a lot of new things. They tried to go beyond superheroes. They tried war comics. They tried horror, sword and sorcery type comics. They tried a lot of different things, but people just like the superheroes, and a lot of people didn't like what was happening with the superheroes. So within 5 years, by about 2016, DC basically had decided they were done with the New 52, and a new event, a new more minor event called Rebirth was launched that basically simplified, they brought back the old continuity and sort of merged it with the New 52 continuity to make it all make sense. And they basically just said, hey, everything you didn't like, that didn't happen anymore. And now it's just the things that we do like, and we're returning things to normal. There is no better exemplifier of this than Superman. The mess of all of this is no better exemplified than Superman. Superman was started fresh. Like I said, he was still acknowledged as the first character, and this is all 5 years from his appearance. So you had Superman, which, by the way, didn't make sense with a lot of characters, but I'm not going to get into that. But if you think about it, like 5 years isn't enough time to explain a lot of the characters that existed. But anyways, Superman he was now single. He and Lois Lane were not together. He was younger, he was moodier, he was more annoying. People didn't like him. They didn't like him to a point that, and they fucked up his character so much throughout the New 52 that they eventually just had to kill the motherfucker. They straight up killed him, and nobody cared. They killed Superman because they fucked him up so bad. And then they even killed Lois Lane too. And then, if you remember, a while back I was talking about Superboy, and I mentioned how that through comic book shenanigans, Superman and Lois just sort of came back with a 12-year-old son. That's when they did that. After they killed this new Superman, they introduced that the original Superman and Lois Lane and their son were now just in this universe as sort of refugees from a previous universe. The previous universe that existed before. So now he just became the new Superman. The old Superman became the new Superman. Then in Rebirth, they just introduced Superman Rebirth, and they just said, that old Superman that we killed, he didn't even happen. He wasn't even real. This Superman and Lois Lane are now basically Rebirth was just kind of a way to wrap them back in without making it so confusing that it's the Superman from the old universe and the new universe that's the main universe. Let's just wrap it all together and say it's just this universe, and let's not confuse ourselves anymore. So that's what Rebirth was. So Rebirth was basically an erasure of the New 52, which was a creative/marketing strategy that at first seemed popular but didn't really work out. And basically all it proved is that number ones are a good sales tactic. That's all it proved, because it proved it to Marvel too, like I said, because they love to restart their series every now and then with new number ones to try to boost sales. But yeah, the New 52 was an interesting idea that was not carried out very well. There were a lot of problems with it, from bad editorial decisions and a lot of lackluster creative decisions, and just not the will to stick with it. That's the problem with DC. Like I mentioned with their All-Star and Earth One lines, they don't have the will. They don't have the will to stick with difficult things, it seems. And that's where they fail. But yeah, that's my kind of summary of the fuckery that was the New 52 line. So yeah, that's that. They were decent comics, but they just didn't. You could just tell people's heart wasn't in it. And that's what matters. People want to watch people want to see a creative endeavor by somebody who really cares about it, not somebody who's just trying to heartlessly make money. They want to see a creative work by somebody who really has a creative passion for it. Of course, you can want to make money from it, that's just smart. But ultimately, the prime motivating factor has to be, I want to make this because I have a desire to make this. If it's just a job, it's just going to come off as just a job. Alright, that's that. That was this week's reading. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I hope you enjoy your reading. Have a good one.